Hi everyone. So we're going to be starting a series of mini videos on the nervous system. And the first part of the nervous system is to talk about one, the purpose of the nervous system, and two, the structural components that form up the nervous system, which is the neuron. So the entire purpose of the nervous system is your body's way to sense basically any type of stimuli. So any type of things that are going to cause your body to react. And it has to sense this from inside of the body, which would be internal stimuli, or outside the body, which is external stimuli. So the first purpose of the nervous system is to receive information from the world. Now, if it's the outside world, we're going to be basically using our senses here. So things like our eyes, which is going to be sensing light, so sight. Things like our nose, which is going to be sensing smells, so chemicals that are carried by gases, so particularly the main gas that you inhale, which is oxygen. Things like taste, which are basically chemicals that are dissolved in saliva from the food that you are consuming. Touch. So when we're talking about touch, we have pressure, we have temperature, we have textures. Also sound, which is again picked up by our ears. And so we have to receive this information. Now, the whole purpose is once that information is taken in, that information needs to go somewhere. And the information has to go somewhere, and the part of the body that deals with all of that information is the brain. So you have to get that information, you have to change it in a way that your brain can understand it, so change it as an electrical impulse. So you have to interpret the stimulus, and then you have to transmit that information to the brain so the brain can understand it, come with a response so that the rest of the body can deal with that information. Now, the brain also needs to be able to store that information for future situations, to have future references. So our nervous system can actually be broken down into two parts. Our central nervous system, so the components of the nervous system that deals directly with the interpretation and the transmittal of our responses, so our CNS, and the peripheral nervous system. So the parts of the nervous system that sends information to the central nervous system, which is our brain and our spinal cord. So our central nervous system is going to basically interpret and respond to the stimuli that is picked up by our peripheral nervous system. So that gets the stimuli, translates the stimuli into a nerve impulse, sending that stimuli to the brain for it to be processed, and then taking the brain's response and sending it to the parts of the body that deal with that process of information. So no matter what the stimuli is, whether it's internal or external, there's basically key steps. And the first step is that it has to get the information. And it's getting information from our sensory receptors. So our eyes, our ears, our nose, our skin, all of those are sensory receptors. It picks up the information. Then the body has to transmit that information to the brain. So it transmits that information to the brain as a nerve impulse. Now, once that information gets to the brain, two things need to happen. The brain stores it for future references, looks at what was also stored in previous occasions to help determine the next part, which is the response to what our stimuli is. So it doesn't matter if our stimuli has to do with sound or touch or hearing or pain. These are the key steps that your body goes through all the time. Now, depending on the stimuli, there can be slight differences, but it's always the same pattern. Get the information sent to brain stores the information, brain sends the response to the specific body parts to do a reaction. Now, the cell that is the cornerstone of the nervous system is the neuron. So the neuron is the specialized cell that's found in the nervous system, and it's very, very different than any other cell in your body. Primarily, it doesn't really regenerate. Out of all of your other tissue types that you have in your body, so again, you have nerve cells, so which forms nerve tissue. You have muscle cells that form muscle tissue. You have connective cells that form connective tissue, so bones, cartilage, blood are all types of connective tissue. And then you have epithelial cells, which are mostly skin cells that form epithelial tissue. Out of all of the four tissue types, nerve tissue doesn't really regenerate. So once you have it for life. There's been lots of research that are looking into regenerating nerve tissue, and that's really promising because you're looking at fixing nerve damage and other sorts, and looking at also trying to prevent neurodegenerative diseases from happening. But right now, doesn't really replace. So if we're looking at how the neuron is special than all of your other cells, is based on its function. So it really is designed to send and receive messages. It's an irregular shape, so out of all of your other cells that you would have in the body, they kind of look like a prototypical animal cell where you have a cell membrane, you have your nucleus, you have your cytoplasm, it looks like a circular blob. The neuron does not look like it whatsoever. As I said earlier, it doesn't really regenerate. They are basically last the length of human lifetime. And it actually, if we're looking at some of the key facts about it, it consumes a ridiculous amount of glucose and oxygen. So the majority of glucose that enters in your body goes directly to the neuron because, again, it's based on its function of sending and receiving messages all the time. So if we look at the shape of a neuron, we have the basic structure right here. Well, we have our nucleus that, again, has our genetic information. We have our dendrites, which are basically offshoots of the cell body, and our dendrites is the part of the neuron that receives our information. And the information that it receives is in the form of a neurotransmitter. Then we have our cell body, which again contains our nucleus and our dendrites. And our cell body is basically the part of the cell that basically determines whether the message is sent to the next neuron. Then we have our axon, which acts as pretty much our passageway for our nerve impulse to travel from our cell body to our axon terminals. And our axon terminals, so this right here, the axon terminals, is the part of the neuron that releases neurotransmitters to go to the next neuron. Okay, in the next video, we are going to spend a lot more time looking at how a nerve impulse goes from one neuron to the next neuron, but at the end of this video is just basically looking at the parts of the neuron. Thanks for watching.